Hi, this is Melissa Newcomb, and welcome to my Module 9 case study. I made a cast of characters from our very realistic case study. There's Principal Inman, James and David, both students. There's a teacher in our case study, a school officer, James's mom and David's mom, and then there's a director of secondary education. We're going to start by summarizing the case and looking at the facts. Assistant Principal Inman worked hard to establish a relationship with his students from the South Side, in particular with James. James had prior issues at school, but Principal Inman's diligence in building a relationship pays off with positive results in behavior and academics for James and other South Side students. Principal Inman called James to the office for an accumulation of tardies. He was going to visit with him about it and try to find out what was going on with it, investigate it. But before James arrived, a teacher called to report a suspicious interaction she observed between James and another student, David Ramos. Please note that David has had no other prior issues at school and has held a sound reputation amongst his teachers and peers. The teacher suspected that drugs were exchanged between James and David, and Principal Inman called James and David, who was escorted by a school officer, to the office, and he held a conference with all three persons present. James confessed that he only asked David to hold something for him. David became nervous and cried, not wanting to speak. The school officer searched David and found brass knuckles, a prohibited weapon on school grounds. James admitted fault and confessed that the knuckles were his and that he was going to use them after school. He only asked David to hold them. He admits that he actually threatened David to hold the brass knuckles. Principal Inman thought that the school officer would not charge David with these accusations and dismiss him. However, because having this weapon on school grounds is a felony possession with a zero-tolerance school board, David and James are both charged. Principal Inman calls both mothers. James's mom responded by hoping her son learns a lesson in the youth detention facility. David's mom is panicked, which turned to anger, and she came to the school within 15 minutes of the phone call. She demanded to know why her son was charged when the other student confessed to owning and placing the knuckles. Principal Inman filled out paperwork on James, but decided that David had been an innocent victim and tore up David's paperwork. 1 week after the event, David was back in class and James was at the detention facility. The director of secondary education called Principal Inman and commanded him to follow through with the papers on David, or Principal Inman would be reprimanded, and this would be on his professional file, this record. So with this next slide, I know that my graphics are kind of silly, but by no means is this case study silly. It's actually quite sobering and very difficult to come up with a decision. There's lots of different things that go into making an ethical decision. Principal Inman is left with a sobering and difficult decision to call. Does he go against the director of secondary education and not fill out the paperwork on David and risk being reprimanded? First, we need to look at the legal or ethical issues at stake here. Has anyone been harmed by the action or decision of another, and if so, in what way? Yes, lots of people have been harmed by a decision. So David and his mom and James were all harmed by Principal Inman when he made the decision to call David into his office with James and the officer present. Some preliminary investigation should have taken place before including the officer. Principal Inman should have spoken with the students individually before the officer's involvement. He failed to consider all the possible consequences for everyone involved. David was harmed further because he now holds a record to contend. And the legal issue, the law labels the possession of a weapon as a felony, and the school labels the possession with a 45-day expulsion. Summarizing this into one sentence, what's going on? The failure to consider all the consequences for everyone involved and rushing to a decision to include the officer in the first conversation has led to serious harm for David, mistrust and betrayal from David's mom, and more harm to James as well. So let's look at the facts. What are the facts that we know about the people the places, and the program, and what are some of the unknown facts as well. So looking at the people first, and what are the facts that are known. Principal Inman was in his first year as the assistant principal. He grew up on the South Side himself. He developed a relationship with James. James is a 15-year-old, strong build, tattoos. He rides a bus. He has prior offenses, has been doing well. Recently, he admitted to making David hold the weapon. He was charged. David's 13 years old, a scholar, a band member, slight build, escorted by the officer to the office, and was caught holding the weapon. He was also charged. There's the officer, James's mom, David's mom, and a secondary director as well. Some of the unknown facts that we should consider would be Principal Inman. We don't know his race. Was he partially biased to the Southside students, namely James? For James and David both, do they have fathers present at home? We know that the mothers were contacted, but where are the fathers? Have they been bullied, or has David in particular been bullied in the past? Has James done the bullying? Do they have a history in a relationship of some sort? These are all questions to consider. When we look at the places, what are the known facts? There's a school building. It's a suburban area. There's diversity in the socioeconomic status of the students. The South Side does not seem to be a privileged area. Some of the things that we don't know, though, are specific demographics. We don't know the specific location or the specific city. We don't know whether the building is new or old. We also, if we look at the program, what are the facts? The students are, the two students, one is 13, one is 15. There's 900 students in the building. The band, it has a band program. It's had a Christmas band concert. There's a scholars program. There's busing to the school. There's recreational basketball that happens before school. What are some of the unknown facts about the program? We don't know if this school is public or private, or if perhaps it's a remediation school. We don't know the specific grade levels. Secondary education, because of the secondary education director. Now, when we've looked at all those facts and the unknown things and considered all of these things, we need to review and prioritize. We're going to look at the important stakeholders: Principal Inman, James, David, the parents, other students like David, the teachers are all stakeholders in this case study. The other students, for them, they're a stakeholder. Like, could this potentially happen to them? What has happened to David? And the teachers, are they going to fear reporting issues? Principal Inman has two choices: file papers on David and bring about great harm to David's future, cause mistrust in his school community, but protect his own professional file. Or two, to not file the papers on David and advocate for David in a legal process, restore trust in his parents or in his mom, but go against the guidance of his superior and be reprimanded in his own professional file. Here's what Principal Newcomb's options might be. Option 1, do nothing. I don't ever think this is a good option. To remain stagnant as an educational leader would really do more harm than good, and it would cause others to question your integrity and trust. Option 2, you could fill out the paperwork or don't fill out the paperwork. For option 2, I would completely take myself and the consequences for myself out of this option and just focus solely on the others. To fill out the paperwork on David would bring about more harm to David's future, mistrust, and a feeling of betrayal amongst parents. However, to not fill out the paperwork on David would be fair to David, but could it be unfair in that everyone would not be treated equally? Option 3 would be to seek guidance, and I think that this option is important no matter what. From your building principal, he should seek guidance and make the building principal aware. So now, looking at these things, we're going to look at the pros and the cons of option 2. Option 2 would be to fill out the paperwork on David and meet with mentors to seek best interest for all involved. I came up with some pros, but mostly cons on this option. And then also in option 2 listed, was to not fill out the paperwork on David and to meet with the mentors to seek best interest for all involved. As you can see, I came up with quite a few pros and a few cons on this option. So, Principal Newcomb, after looking at the facts, the legal issues, the ethical issues, choose your best option. So, this case study actually made my stomach hurt a little bit. It's so realistic and could easily happen. And as educational leaders, we must pause and take time to carefully evaluate our options and the consequences that each choice could potentially cause. When making a final decision for this case study, I had to remember my moral compass and not stray. It's equally important to put others before myself and to examine the potential harms that my decisions might cause them. Closely examining all options and creating an ethical framework of pros and cons for each option helped to clarify my decision. So, Principal Newcomb's ethical choice. I would choose to not file the report on David and advocate for what is ethically in his best interest. In doing so, I believe that I would be cultivating an ethical school community by modeling high ethical standards. So, Principal Newcomb, how would you implement your decision? Step 1, do not file the paperwork on David. Contact building principal and higher administration. Let the director of secondary education know my decision and that I must stand by my code of ethics and cannot accuse David of fault. Know that I may be reprimanded. Step 2, gather all information and evidence needed to support your decision. My decision. Meet with higher administration and advocate for David and James by admitting my own fault in handling the situation. I would seek to reach out to James and commend him for his admission of guilt and try to continue the relationship that had been built. Step 3, openly address teachers and staff on decision and meet with any other legal parties that need addressed. Meet with David's mother to apologize and hopefully seek restoration. With all of that said, this case study demonstrates how difficult ethical decision-making can be. Educational leaders must be able to carefully examine multiple options for handling complex situations with integrity, caring for all people involved. They must be able to implement and model ethical practices in their school community, shaping a safe, nurturing, and virtuous environment for all. Thank you so much.